Why did you cheat on your partner? Story 1. Because I truly had no idea what a healthy or functional relationship looked like. My parents were married for almost 30 years and had already started the cycle of cheating on each other well before I was born. My grandma used to tell me stories of being friends with my grandpa's girlfriends because she just wasn't toxic and jealous like other women. In the relationship where I cheated, I was being treated like garbage, financially supporting us both even though I was 10 years younger and a waitress, enduring a lot of abuse from a very broken man. I felt trapped in the same cycle I had watched my mom and my grandma live. I didn't really know better. A guy at work started paying attention to me, and I loved it. He was sweet and poetic and romantic, committed to helping his sister raise his niece, was out of the house and working instead of drinking my paycheck away and punching holes in my walls. A little harmless work flirting quickly escalated, and before I knew it, I was having a whole-ass affair. I started to prepare myself to leave my boyfriend for my affair partner when I found out that my boyfriend had been cheating on me with anyone he could find on Craigslist, including stealing money from me to pay sex workers. Any guilt I felt for cheating evaporated right then. I threw all my clothes in a trash bag and drove to my affair partner's house, ready to start our new life together. He had another girl over, basically admitted that a lot of what he had said to me was because he thought I would never leave. All in all, it was a mess. If you're unhappy in your relationship, do the work that will either fix it or get you out. That new person is flawed too. They won't fix you or fulfill you. Only you can do that. Story 2. So simply put, she cheated on me, so I cheated back. Age when story started, 22, age now 30. The story gets a lot more dramatic. I worked as a pizza delivery guy at the time. I came home from work one day with chocolates and flowers for her. We had been together for 5 years at this point, and she was screwing another guy in our bed. As soon as I entered my apartment and heard sex noises, I knew I snuck into the frame of my bedroom door and witnessed the act with my own 2 eyes. They never even noticed I was there. I was so hurt by the situation, which I should have confronted head-on, that I left my own house and went to my buddy's house and smoked a blunt. He told me I should let her know I caught her and see how she reacted, but I didn't. I was just trying to rationalize what I did wrong a lot. Several hours later, I returned home, gave her the chocolate and flowers, and continued like nothing was wrong. I was a fool. Needless to say, she got ready for her job, which was a night shift security guard, and left around 7 p.m. I sat there for several hours crying after she left. Around 10 p.m., our roommate called and asked if I could come up to her job and see what was going on with her car. The roommate is also my significant other's best friend. I went up there, figured out the issue with that PS car, and got her back to the house. The battery cable was messed up if anyone was wondering. After the roommate got home, she cooked dinner, spaghetti and garlic bread. I ate and sat on the couch. I proceeded to stay on that couch knowing what had occurred in my bed earlier during the day. About 3 a.m., I had the biggest emotional breakdown. I began crying to the point I could no longer breathe. As I sat in the dark crying, the roommate came and sat down beside me, pulled my head into her lap, and rubbed my head. I'm not quite sure how long we stayed there like that, but I eventually fell asleep. I woke up the following day on the couch with my significant other waking me up. I proceeded to go through this day as well, holding in my emotions like an idiot. After she left for work again around 7 p.m., I just sat there for hours. Eventually that evening, I wrote a letter addressing my feelings and the cheating. It was about 3 pages long. The roommate came in shortly after 10 p.m. and did her evening routine, showering and all that. What happened next surprised me. As I lay on the couch, she came and began to talk to me. She stated she could tell something was wrong. So I told her about the cheating that I had witnessed and all that. I think she was in utter shock because she didn't say anything for like 10 minutes after I told her. This next part is the most shocking because I wasn't expecting it. It also should have been a huge red flag. The roommate asked me, "Do you want me to get back at her?" I never answered yes, I just jumped on her. We did many different things that night. I also had a new experience with girls who like to be choked. So here is the part where shit goes down. Still not the craziest part. I fell asleep on the couch after that night only to be woken up by arguing around 7 o'clock hours. My significant other had gotten home and her and the roommate were arguing. The roommate confronted my so about cheating. The words that came out of the roommate's mouth next were stupid. That's why I let your man fill me up while you were working, bitch. Oh, those are fighting words. Well, that is exactly what happened to Fight. The fight carried on with me trying to break it up, to no avail. Entry was then made by 2 cops, found out later that the neighbors called because they could hear it. Roommate got tasked. So got tackled, both of them went to jail. Several hours later, the roommate returned after her mother bonded her out. She told me we would talk about this situation later and left for work. My significant other then came by with her sister and dad around 11 p.m. that night and packed all her clothes and other property. I also had her take the bed because I didn't want it. She left that evening only saying, "I guess you know I'm breaking up with you." I just shook my head, and she left. So we're gonna fast forward a little to about 8 months later. Little tidbit: roommate got pregnant from our one-night stand. The roommate was also still staying with me still. Roommate goes into labor. I take her to the hospital, and after 14 glorious hours of labor, we welcomed our beautiful daughter into this world. After my daughter was born, I went outside to smoke a cigarette, and across the parking lot, I noticed someone who looks quite familiar loading a baby in a pickup truck. I was about 400 feet across a parking lot at night. I shrugged it off, sure I was overanalyzing the situation. I had myself convinced it wasn't my ex. Well, I was wrong. About 3 months later, I get served with some civil paperwork from an attorney requesting I submit to a paternity test. After looking through all the paperwork with an attorney of my own, he was able to provide me with a date the child was born, which was a day before my daughter's birth. I knew then I did see her at the hospital that day. I took the paternity test. I was indeed the father. After a lengthy child custody case, I pay $420 a month in child support and get my son 2 weekends out of the month. I'm also married to the roommate and have a 7-year-old daughter and son now. I did indeed feel like a piece of shit how that whole incident unfolded, but I wouldn't change it for anything in the world. A little advice: communication in a relationship is key. Also, if you don't want no babies, use protection. Although don't cheat, it's just not good. Story 3. It's considered cheating in my case, but things led up to it which caused the incident. We were on the 4-year mark and I was busy with a 9 to 5 in school. This didn't leave me much time aside from exercising and trying to make time for her. She liked to drink, but near the end it got so bad. Communication prior to this was great, but seemed toxic when she started drinking heavily / being out all night, which led me despising her and not caring anymore. Knowing we were still in a relationship, I still made effort to talk / make time for her. It wasn't reciprocated and seemed like she didn't care to try. There would be points where I'd text her and she wouldn't reply back for 8-9+ hours, or in some instances, days. By the end, it seemed normal to me and made me believe that everyone would treat me like that. With the stress of all that I was doing, made me gain weight, and with her neglect, undesirable. At some point, I decided to focus on myself, and this was while we were still together. Kind of like we weren't together, but we're still in a relationship. I started going out with friends / meeting new people. It was during this period I met someone, and we clicked. I didn't think anything of it at the time, but along with other people, her and I exchanged numbers. Whenever we exchanged messages, she responded instantly and seemed like she wanted to talk to me. This was still while my then GF was being aloof / ignorant towards me. You guys can figure out where this is going. Regarding my GF at the time, I guess she got heavily intoxicated one night. I received a phone call around 2 to 3 a.m. When I answered, a guy was talking. Told me him and his friends found her passed out in the bar and called me after unlocking her phone. I went and got her and broke up with her couple days after. Story 4. Okay, this happened like 20 years ago with an ex. I was around 22 years old, young gay, and he was around 40, I think. The age gap was something that always rubbed me the wrong way. I was constantly doubting the relationship. Even kind of broke up a few times because of it, but then we came back together. We had been together like for 4 months by then. One night at the club, with some friends, I decided that if I was constantly doubting it, it was because it was something that I wasn't okay with, and decided to break up with him. He wasn't with me that night, so I decided to tell him the next day. Since I was already at the club and was going to break up with him, I thought it wouldn't matter if I met someone new. And I did make out with one of the club dancers, and then went to his place and had sex and everything. It wasn't until the next day morning, sobered up, that I realized I didn't want to break up with him, and even worse, I also realized that meant I had just cheated on him. Felt awful, I called him later during the day, told him everything while crying, assuming he'd just break up with me, but instead he told me to meet somewhere public. He brought me a gift and told me he was okay with it. He understood what I was feeling, and it's just things that happen. I was confused by the reaction. We were together for a few months more, and then he broke up with me. Can't blame him. I was a horny mess by then. Ran into him a few times at some parties and things were okay. He never stopped being nice to me, which I appreciate. Story 5. Because my wife told me that she was no longer interested in having sex with me, she didn't want me having it with anyone else, and she forbade me from watching porn or masturbating. I still did the latter, but we could never discuss it or she'd freak out. So to get my sexual needs met by someone other than myself, for several years, a few times per year, I paid a sex worker for a happy ending massage. This was still cheating, but I rationalized it as the mildest form of cheating possible. No chance of an STI, no chance of an unwanted pregnancy, no emotional involvement. I knew it was wrong, but at the time I felt like it was my best choice out of several lousy choices. I realize now I should have just said at the time, I want a divorce. That's where we ended up anyway, and I would have saved myself, my wife, and our kids some needless pain over the years. By cheating on her and hiding it from her, I made it so much worse when she eventually found out. To cheaters on here, I would say, get out of your relationship. If you're cheating, you're clearly not happy. Do yourself and your partner a favor and just end it now, before it all goes to hell. Story 6. He cheated on me postpartum with my first daughter, and years later, I could not forgive or forget. I did not cheat to get back at him, but I did cheat. My current husband is who I cheated with. Long backstory summed up. My current husband and I met at 14, and he was the first person I slept with. He was running wild during his high school years/early 20s and would not let himself date me because he knew he'd f***ed up. We talked on and off throughout the years. After I had my daughter and got cheated on, he actually messaged me one day and basically told me that he'd always been in love with me. I had always felt the same exact way about him, but never said it. I did not think he felt that way and was really surprised. Nothing really happened at that point, but a few years later I kept telling my husband I was unhappy, couldn't forgive him, didn't want to be with him. He wasn't really open to divorce at that point, and I was done. My current husband messaged me randomly to tell me I was in a dream he had the night before. We pretty much started talking every day from that point on. I lived in a different state, so we FaceTimed a lot, and I got my plans together to move back to my home state, file for divorce, etc. I did make a trip to see him twice. While I was getting things set up, and the first time, I think we had sex 9 times in like 24 hours. I felt guilty, but I also had already told my husband I wanted to divorce and he wasn't accepting, and I was no longer physical with him. I had an interview in person up here for a job a few weeks after and stayed in a hotel with him for a few days. After that, I moved back with my kids, X moved back up here with his parents, I filed for divorce, and we were then officially together. I honestly don't regret it. I am so in love with my husband and he is so in love with me. It took a lot of years and a lot of ups and downs for us to finally get to be together. Story 7. Throughout my relationship with my wife, she hasn't stuck up for me to her parents. Her father blatantly disrespects me to my face, and her mother has also said some pretty hurtful things about me. Another part of this is, my wife lives for the approval of her family, and not for the happiness that we should have. In 2019, I accepted a job that was supposed to be my stepping stone into the corporate world. Well, that job did not go as planned. I had a supervisor that would yell at me and berate me about not knowing how to do proper VLOOKUPs or pivot tables. Also keep in mind, I explained that I had no Excel experience in my interview. My mental health was at an all-time low. I had to talk myself into getting out of bed in the morning, and then give myself another pep talk about getting on the elevator. I expressed how miserable I was to my wife and explained that I wanted to quit, and she didn't give me her blessing. She was too concerned with what her family would think of me. Months go by, and I finally had enough and gave my 2 weeks. My wife wouldn't look at me for months. I talked to my therapist about all of this and was told that my wife was not a safe space for me. After that revelation, I started to reflect on our relationship even more. My wife doesn't respect me. She tries to dissect every word that comes out of my mouth. When I got an extra job to make ends meet during lockdown, she complained that she didn't see me enough. There have been too many situations to list out here. But the summary is, I don't view my wife as a refuge for me. It additionally sucks because my own family doesn't talk to me because I've tried to hold them accountable for the damage they have done to me in my childhood, and now they view me as the bad guy. Years of being like this has taken a toll on me as a man. It's to the point where I don't desire sex from my wife. Here's where I answer the question. A few months ago, a woman named Samantha was hired at my company. It was on me to get her trained in our accounting program, and I loved every minute of it. She looked at me in a way that I don't believe any woman has looked at me. It felt nice to feel respected. Gradually, things became physical. It started out with playful rubber band flicking to shoulder rubs. From shoulder rubs to sitting next to each other in meetings. Then to going out to eat on lunch breaks, hugs. A kiss on the cheek. Booking hotel rooms before and after work. I'm not condoning my actions, but I felt so alive. I felt loved. I felt supported. I felt safe.